What's up, YouTube? This was one of my favorite podcasts that I've ever recorded, really breaking down the offensive line class in depth. I wanted to share it here on YouTube because I don't plan on doing a top 10 guard or center or interior offensive lineman podcast. So if you want to hear me talk about those guys or the tackles beyond the top 10 that I talked about in my top 10 tackles video, this is really going to be the main source to hear about that before the draft. So you can listen to it here on YouTube or go check it out on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. It's the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. I do encourage you also to rate and review the thing and just enjoy. Also, make sure you join me on draft night as well here on YouTube. So here's the podcast. Hope you like it. Hit the like button, all that. See ya. What is going on, everybody? It is really good to be back with the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. I think we're going to have a bit of a shorter show today. Recording this about 5:30 p.m. here on Wednesday, April 8th, and want to be done in time for dinner. So that's the plan. We're going to get through this. We're going to go through the top offensive linemen in this class. Going to do a deep dive into this class. So probably going to talk off the top of my head about 20 to 25 players in this offensive line class that to me is one of the best offensive tackle classes that I've seen. Definitely the best that I've seen since I've been doing this, but it's been regarded as one of the top classes of the last decade or so, potentially getting a little revival of these offensive linemen. Many of you big NFL fans know that with a lack of pass protection in the league right now, a lot of these poor quarterbacks running for their lives, a lot of fans have been really screaming for offensive line help. So maybe this class will provide a bit of an influx of talent at that position. And I'm sure the running backs won't complain either with some bigger lanes to run through. So before we hop in, I don't need to plug the SeatGeek because you can't buy tickets to events right now anyway. But if you do want to support the podcast and in turn also get just a massive influx of TFG content here, check out my Patreon, patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy. Just today, I started my 7-round mock draft series there on Patreon. I'm going to be doing 7-round mock drafts for every single team in the league. So that's going to be a blast to do that on Patreon. I also got the idea to do a 32-team 7-round mock draft stream on my Twitch. So more content will be available to you, but you got to go to twitch.tv/ThatFranchiseGuy. I might upload that to YouTube. We'll see. But lots of other avenues outside of the podcast. And, of course, rate and review the podcast as well. Those are all the best ways to get my content and support the podcast in the process. Excuse me. So, shall we? Let's hop in. I think what I'm going to do is start with the tackles and then do interior offensive line, kind of split it up into two groups. And I did do a top 10 tackles video on YouTube, so you guys know where I'm at on the top 10 guys. And I haven't had a whole lot of change since I made that video, but I'm going to recap and go through those guys anyway. Maybe hit a little bit more on like scheme fits and stuff. We'll see. But my number one guy is still Andrew Thomas. These top three guys for me, Andrew Thomas, Jedrick Wills, and Tristan Wirfs in that order, are all kind of top 10, top 12 prospects, three of the best tackle prospects I can remember. Really going back to like Ronnie Stanley. I did like Jonah Williams last year, but I would say these three are top 5 tackle prospects in the last 5 years. So you're really looking at an influx of potentially elite tackles. Now, I'm personally a lot higher on Andrew Thomas than a lot of people. One thing I really don't get about Andrew Thomas is that people question his athleticism. And I think that that's because he's stacking up to Jedrick Wills and Tristan Wirfs, who are legitimate freaks. Even Mekhi Becton is a freak in his own right. Andrew Thomas isn't like all-time great freak, but he is still a well above average athlete for an offensive lineman. His get-off to me as a run blocker is actually the best in this class, and I actually think he is the best move blocker other than maybe Tristan Wirfs, who is just so fluid as an athlete. When he gets on the move, it's really easy for him to find guys at the second level. But I think Andrew Thomas is going to be an excellent run blocker, potentially the best in this class with the best technique. His play strength might leave a little bit to be desired, but it's still well above average in my opinion. His ability to hold blocks and also handle power rush as a pass protector. Now, this all sounds great, right? What's his weakness? I think if there is a weakness, it's that he is not very good in his traditional drop backs, his traditional like full-on pass sets with his like long kick slides. Georgia ran a lot of quick sets, a lot of play action. They frankly didn't ask him to really protect for that long, but he was hit or miss when they had those traditional sets. More often than not, he looked very good doing it, and his foot speed was really good. Now, his technique was a little off as far as just kind of being coordinated in those longer kick slides that he's going to have to do more at the next level. But here's the thing. He got better every year at Georgia. He's only 21 years old. He's a true junior coming out. I think he's the most stable guy, just both sides, as a run blocker, as a pass blocker. And if the only question is technique in his kick slides, which might be the most easy thing to really implement to me, I'm pretty confident that he's going to develop into a franchise left tackle. To me, a guy that I don't do comparisons for offensive linemen, but a guy that he reminds me a lot of is Trent Williams. I think he really is that good of an athlete at left tackle. I think people are sleeping on his athleticism quite a bit. So he is my number one guy. Now, he's a left tackle, and then my number two guy is Jedrick Wills. And keep in mind, I do have these guys very close. So if you are looking for a right tackle and you have a left tackle, maybe you would go Jedrick Wills. Now, a lot of people have Wills as their number one tackle, and I don't blame you for it. He is a freak. He's super, super strong. Definitely, after Mekhi Becton, the strongest offensive tackle in this class. Really good run blocker, has exceptional get-off. He's going to be a stud. Now, he's a little shorter. He's 6'4". His arms are a little shorter, 34 inches, which is by no means like a death sentence or even a weakness. It's just, he's got 34-inch arms. Andrew Thomas has 36.5-inch arms, and that really helps you to reach and make up for any kind of space that's created by speed rushers to have longer arms. It also makes it more difficult for guys to get inside and power rush you. So those long arms really do matter, especially at the tackle position. He's just a little bit of a shorter, clunkier guy. I also thought his foot speed was a little bit slower than some of these other top guys. I didn't think he had the most fluid movement, and I think there's a chance he struggles with speed at tackle at the next level, like legitimate, like Brian Burns, Von Miller, like the top end speed rushers. He's a good enough athlete that he can handle, like Myles Garrett speed. Preston Smith came to mind for some reason. Even like Leonard Floyd, like some of those higher end speed rushers, he can definitely handle. But when you start talking about Danielle Hunter, Von Miller, Brian Burns, who's a young guy, I think those are the kind of mismatches, especially with like Hunter and Brian Burns, who have longer arms as well with speed. Those might be some tougher matchups for Jedrick Wills, but for the most part, a really sound tackle prospect. And then we got Tristan Wirfs, who's going to be the most technically raw player of these three. Now, he is the best pound-for-pound athlete. He is kind of like the Saquon Barkley of offensive linemen, if you will. Like, this dude just, you shouldn't be able to move like he does at 6'5", 320. I would be intrigued, like could this guy be a defensive lineman? Like, I don't know. I feel like there's a chance his athleticism would have been better utilized as a D lineman. It's too late for that, obviously, but he's that type of special, kind of like Aaron Donald at a big body, can move really well. Obviously a different deal, but anyway, he is just a total freak with 36.5-inch vertical, 4.85 40 time, just ridiculous. As a player, just a little more raw. I think power is actually something, while he is a strong guy, I think he needs to better learn how to handle power at the next level. Same thing we said about Jedrick Wills. He's got shorter arms. But I think he leans a little bit too much. He lets guys inside a little more than he should, and he ends up on his ass a lot. I think he's just such a good athlete, and his tape was, for the most part, really good. I just thought from a technique standpoint, he left himself in more compromising situations, for the most part because of the fact that he would lean and not really trust his technique as much as he should. But he's 21 years old. That can all come. So those top three guys, really, really solid. And then for me, this is where I bring in an unpopular opinion, and that is Matthew Peart, just a smidgen above Mekhi Becton. Two completely different types of prospects. Peart is long, 6'7", quick, fluid, speed, but doesn't necessarily have the power. Whereas Mekhi Becton, who we'll talk about in a second, is 6'7", 360 pounds, chunky dude, but he can just move in a straight line and is just extremely powerful. But they're both 6'7". So the reason I like Peart, his kick slides looked much smoother. His ability to land his punches inside, much more consistent. He had play strength. He was definitely a guy that, and keep in mind, Peart is 2 years ahead of the curve. He's a redshirt senior, and Becton is a junior. So you would think that a guy that's 2 years older might have better technique and stuff, especially because if you watch Peart 2 years ago, like Becton 2 years ago, Becton now is a much better prospect than Peart was 2 years ago. Here's the thing I like about Peart. This guy, I'm pretty sure was a basketball prospect. I don't know if he went to UConn to play basketball or not, but like he was 6'7", like 280 pounds when he got there. And he played at tackle under 300 pounds for a long time. And he was kind of on people's radars, was like, this guy's not strong enough to be a legitimate high-end NFL prospect. He's up to 315 pounds now, which is definitely playable. That's actually where most of the successful 6'7" tackles in the league, they're actually in that 315 to 325 range. Becton's a little more of an outlier. So with his movement skills, he's now put on weight in his senior season, really showed consistent dominant play. I also really like Peart's run blocking better than Becton, which is very controversial in certain ways. You know, if you just have a guy right in front of him and you're saying, I want you to push this guy back, Mekhi Becton can do that better. But Peart's mobility and his get off and his ability to get to spots, especially up to the second level, but not just that. I'm talking about reach blocks. Like if you have a guy, you know, a whole gap away from you, I trust that Peart is going to be able to get there and get his head across and keep his hands inside and drive his feet much, much better than Becton, who is a little bit slower to get there, and he just uses, like Becton just stands up and uses his arms. I don't think he's going to get away with that as much in the NFL as he did at Louisville. So I really like Peart. Now, he doesn't have the same upside as Becton, but I don't think it's that far behind because he really is a special athlete. I think if you're going to talk about how great Becton's able to move at his size and talk about how big of a freak he is, I think you also got to talk about how big of a freak Matt Peart is. Peart was faster, and Peart actually did, I think it's Peart, not Peart, but he actually did the agility scores, unlike Becton, who hid from that. Better vertical jump, same broad jump. And actually, Matt Peart, now that I'm seeing this, he actually benched more than Mekhi Becton, believe it or not. So, yeah, Becton's 360 pounds, but how much of that is functional, you know? So I do have Becton fifth, and I do like Becton, and I do have all these guys have first-round grades, but I'm just really high on Matt Peart, who really impressed at the Senior Bowl, by the way, just dominated. But yeah, we've kind of hit on Becton. He is just unnaturally big and athletic. He's 6'7", 360 pounds, ran a 5'10", 40, which is good at his size, but we also have guys like Wills and Cleveland who ran in the 4'9", 4'8". Jedrick Wills ran 5'05". Matt Peart ran faster. Like Jack Driscoll, Austin Jackson, these guys all ran faster than Becton. So yeah, it's rare that he was able to move fast relative to his size, but he also didn't do the three cones. He didn't do the broad jump. He didn't do the vertical jump. He only had 23 bench reps. So I think we're overstating how great of an athlete he is. Yeah, he can run fast in a straight line and had good technique for his 40 time. But He is chunky, man. He is clunky. He doesn't get to spots quickly. I thought his run blocking technique was laughable. If you're just running inside zones and you are blocking guys that are within your gap, he can get there and drive you back. I have no doubt about that. And he actually offers a really high floor as a pass blocker because he's just so long and so big that he's really tough to get around. Now, if you are Von Miller and Daniil Hunter, you might be able to have the get off and enough length to get around the edge, but you're really not going through this guy. Now, one thing Becton also did as a pass blocker that drove me kind of crazy is, if you're not going to be able to get through him or around him, the one place people are going to look to exploit is setting up the edge and then coming back inside, right, on counter moves and double moves. He did not protect the inside as well as you'd like to see. Now, you can absolutely coach that, and he's young, but he didn't do it. He gave up the inside a lot and didn't understand the importance of not getting beat inside, which is a huge thing for these tackles. So Becton has the higher upside, but I am much more comfortable with Pert. He's 2 years ahead of Becton's development. I think he's a much better player than Becton is now. And if I like Pert's developmental upside, who only has played 1 year at that 315-pound mark, who's only going to get better, I'm just taking Matt Pert. So I definitely needed to spend some time diving into that because that's one of my more controversial draft opinions, because Becton might be a top 10 pick. But I'm saying that to me is a mistake. I do think Becton is a good player. I think he's a top 20 player in this class and definitely warrants some of the hype, but I think the hype has gone just too far. I don't think you pass, especially on Wirfs, Wills, or Thomas, for Mekhi Becton, and personally, I'm taking Matt Pert over him. Then my number 6 guy is another kind of out there opinion, and it's Jack Driscoll out of Auburn. He's a 2-year starter. He transferred from some East Coast school. It might have been UConn. It wasn't UConn. Syracuse or something. He transferred from somewhere, but he started at right tackle the last 2 years for Auburn. He's just been so smooth. Like I went into his tape watching him like, all right, we're probably getting a 3rd, 4th round guy, probably not the best athlete, probably okay technique, like whatever. I didn't have very high expectations, and it just popped immediately. Like in the SEC, he just held up so well. He almost never got beat. And then I look into it further, and he was a really good athlete at the combine. He ran a 5.02 and looked smooth. This guy's a good athlete. So that's not a question. He played in the SEC. He dominated as a pass blocker. He also has really good get-off if you want to start talking about his run blocking. Now, the one thing with him is he's not super strong. He did cross the 20 bench press kind of threshold that I look for. But he's not super strong. He doesn't have the craziest play strength. He's not going to hold blocks all that long. He's probably never going to thrive as a run blocker, but that is why my comparison for him is Brian Bulaga, who's never been a great run blocker in the NFL, but he's been a very, very steady pass blocker who wins with his technique almost constantly. And that's Jack Driscoll to me. I have an early 2nd round grade on him. I'd be more than happy to take him at the end of the 1st round. Now, you might be able to get him at the back end of day 2 or even day 3. I don't know. I don't know where other people come in on him, but I definitely walked away extremely impressed, especially after I just watched Austin Jackson, Josh Jones, and Ezra Cleveland, and Isaiah Wilson, who are my next 4 guys in that order. But Austin Jackson just wasn't as consistent. His footwork, he didn't get as much depth in his kick slides. He didn't land his punches as well as Driscoll. He was a little bit stronger as a run blocker. You can definitely see a little more upside with Austin Jackson. He's also 2 years younger. I do like Jackson. I also have an early second round grade on him. Also a guy that could maybe kick in inside and play guard as well. But he's a good player. And then Josh Jones out of Houston, he is most people's 5th tackle, and I do like him. I also have an early 2nd round grade on him. So I have 8 tackles here that I frankly, like, if I had to take them in the 1st round because these guys were flying off the board, I'd be comfortable doing it. I like all of these players. The thing with Josh Jones, I started with him as my 5th tackle. And as I watched Matt Peart, as I watched Jack Driscoll, I was like, these guys are just way smoother pass protectors. Josh Jones, to me, had some clunkier feet. I didn't think he was, like, incredibly good landing his punches. He was good. Like, he was pretty sound, playing at a lower-level competition as well. But I didn't fall in love with Josh Jones. I was like, okay, this guy doesn't get beat too often, but he's kind of playing a lot of these weird like 3-3-5 defenses and not being asked to do traditional dropbacks too often. But he is just a steady, smart guy. He's going to pick up blitzes extremely well. He's got the play strength. He's got the athleticism. But people keep saying Josh Jones is a great athlete, and I disagree pretty strongly with that. And it was actually reinforced at the Combine. 5.27 40 time, 109 broad jump is fine. A 28.5-inch vertical. Like, I thought he looked chunky on tape. Clunky, sorry, not chunky. All these guys look chunky, to be fair. I thought his footwork just looked a little clunky on tape, just to be completely fair. But he was really good at the Senior Bowl. I definitely was impressed, and I like Josh Jones, but I've heard people say that he's a great athlete, that Andrew Thomas is a worse athlete than him. I think of the 8 guys we just talked about, Josh Jones is the worst athlete of the 8. Now, his technique is a little better than like Austin Jackson and Mekhi Becton, but I think that lack of athleticism, especially when he is 2 years older than those 2 guys we just mentioned, is what leads to him being at number 8. But regardless, I think all 8 of these guys are really good players, will be starting caliber tackles. If one guy is not a starter out of this group, I think Austin Jackson is the guy. Or Josh Jones if he just eventually gets passed by like a really good option. But I think Josh Jones will be a starting caliber, capable tackle in the NFL. Then there's a tier drop. I mean, there was a tier after 3, and then I've got a tier after 8. So I actually think 4 through 8 is a pretty good group of guys. If I ended up with any of those, I'd be pretty satisfied. Now, 9, I've got Ezra Cleveland, really smooth athlete, but I wanted to like him a lot more than I did. Just not very physical at all, and he's a super athlete, like possibly the best athlete in this class. Just like super smooth, really strong bench press, like 30 bench reps. He is the definition of a freak, but he didn't use that as much as I wanted to see. He is a fluid mover as a run blocker. He's got the get off. He gets to spots well, but he doesn't finish blocks. Really, that's my biggest thing about him. Like, I felt like I needed to kind of give this guy a pump talk every time he'd walk up to the line of scrimmage, because I felt like he was a little soft. He would not like he would latch as a pass blocker, but then for no good reason, he would just kind of stop. Like, he would stop moving his feet. He'd even like let his arms down. I think he's got a lack of play strength, even though he did have good bench press, but the bench isn't everything as far as play strength. I do like him. I think he's a developmental potential star tackle, but I think you need a good coach and you need to get a little extra oomph out of him. I think he's just a little bit kind of timid and soft right now as a tackle, which is concerning. You got to be kind of nasty to play tackle at the next level. So I put him in Kansas City in the second round of my most recent What I Would Do mock draft. That's the type of spot. You put him behind Mitchell Schwartz. You put him behind, I always forget his name, the left tackle there that's been there forever. Screw it. That name I struggle with more than most. Oh, man, I want Fisher. Eric Fisher. He's been there forever. I just can never remember his name. But yeah, you put him behind those 2 30-year-old guys with Andy Reid and that coaching staff. I think he could, in 2 years, step in for an Eric Fisher, who's actually a pretty similar athlete, and be the left tackle for Patrick Mahomes for a long time. But I don't think he's necessarily ready right now. And then I have Isaiah Wilson, who's getting a lot of first-round hype, and I totally understand it because he's a rare athlete. Honestly, between him and Mekhi Becton, there's not a huge difference. The only thing is Becton was just a much better pass protector at the next level. And Wilson's a sophomore, a redshirt sophomore, so he's only played 2 years. Here's kind of where I stand on Wilson. I think his feet are clunky, much clunkier than Becton. And there's a huge gap between those two, so don't get me wrong. Both these guys, just Becton and Wilson, have a lot to learn as far as blitz recognition, not giving up the inside, technique, like landing your punches, preparing for counter moves. Both those guys have a ton to learn, but Wilson to me was just much more clunky as far as his drops and his footwork. And that's why I'm very tempted to actually say Isaiah Wilson is a guard in the NFL. I'm sure from his perspective, he would much rather stay as a tackle prospect. The money there is better. The glory there is better. I'm down to try him at tackle and see what he does, but like the Bears in the second round, for example, who Kyle Long retired, they don't have a right guard. I would love to take Isaiah Wilson, and as long as he's willing, just plug him at guard. And I think he just might be the number one guard prospect in this entire class because he is so strong. He's got great get-off. You're not running through this guy, but you can run around him. And that's why I like him at guard, where he's kind of playing in a phone booth, and you don't have to worry about the speed rush to the edge or getting beat on the inside as much. I just think he translates so much better as a guard. You could try him at tackle. He's got the athleticism, but he just has so much room to grow. I think he actually would be a much better player at guard. So I do keep him as a tackle prospect, but that's kind of where I stand on him. And I have a third round grade. I might need to bump that up just a little bit because I think he might be the best guard prospect in this class. So it's a little tough. Then 11th, Prince Tega Wanago. We're still talking about really good players, by the way, here. And we're now at the 11th tackle. He was a guy that had first-round hype heading into this season and just kind of got surpassed, quite frankly, by all these other guys. He's not unlike Greg Little coming out of Ole Miss. Just kind of raw, but a good athlete, and just kind of long and strong and tough to get around. I thought his footwork was pretty good. He's a good run blocker. He could very well be a day one starter. He really could. Just as such a deep tackle class. I'd just put him in Cleveland. I think him and Chris Hubbard at left tackle in the third round for Prince Tagawanago. I think he would compete and probably beat out a guy like Chris Hubbard, who's kind of at best, one of the worst starting tackles in the league, but could be a really good swingman. Like, I think he's kind of a guy that could come in and beat that guy out right away. So I think he's a really good tackle prospect. In previous years, probably a early second round pick, just getting pushed down a little bit here. Kind of similar thing for Lucas Niang. He's a weird player. Like, he's just built strange. He has tiny legs, so really quick feet, but a really heavy base at 6'6", 316. And because he gets his power from his chest and his arms, he leans a lot. And it's not even that he necessarily struggles to anchor. Like, he's a powerful player, but he's going to end up on the ground a lot. I would really like to see him kind of refigure out his build a little bit, get some strength in his legs. I do think that would help kind of his lower body strength. And I think he gets tossed around a little bit because he carries so much weight in his top half. He can lean too much, and it's easy to kind of direct him because all the weight's in his top half. So I think just being more balanced and coordinated would really help him. But he's a good player, and he's really physical and athletic. So I do like him. I just question maybe, he's kind of a fringe starter. Now, I mocked him in the third round of the Jets. He would instantly start there because they have nobody. So it's all relative, right? He probably wouldn't start for like the Patriots or the Chiefs or the Packers, like teams that, have good linemen. But if you're desperate, he could be a starter. I think we're going to talk about 3 more tackles here. So Ben Bartch is my 13th tackle, and he's intriguing. He's a really tough eval coming out of St. John's. Having gone to St. Thomas, our bitter rival is St. John's D3 football. I'm supposed to hate Ben Bartch, but I didn't hate him. He's a really strong player. Now, I had heard, he didn't really have to get by with his technique in college because he's such a good athlete for that size, or for that level of competition. I don't know. I thought his technique was pretty good. He does have to, run his feet a little better. He can kind of lose his balance and needs to be able to drop back better, be more smooth, handle speed a little better. For the most part, I like him. It's just a matter of, does his play translate to the next level? And at the Senior Bowl, that was a big question, and he held up. I believe in the guy. He's physical, definitely a good enough athlete. If he played at an Ohio State, at an Oklahoma, would he have been a good enough player to stand out and be as dominant and be like that, or would he be just another guy? It's really hard to say. It's a really tough eval. Obviously, very good player on tape and played well at the Senior Bowl. He didn't test at the Combine, which you'd like to see, but I think he's worth a shot in the 3rd or 4th round. The nice thing about Barch, too, is he could totally play guard, and I like having that flexibility, especially, 3rd, 4th round. You're not always going to draft a starter, but to me, every single team should have a swing man. The NBA has the 6th man of the year award. I think every NFL team should have that on the offensive line and be someone that can play guard or tackle, and maybe even center. I don't know if Ben Barch can play center or not, but I'm looking at, like a guy like Billy Turner for the Packers. We talked about Chris Hubbard. I think every team should have a guy that can play left tackle, left guard, or right tackle in the event of injury and plug in the middle of a game if need be. That can be Ben Barch. Now, maybe his skill just totally translates and he's a starter, but I think at worst you're getting a pretty high floor, high character, good worker with all the physical tools to compete in the NFL. And my next guy, Calvin Throckmorton, totally falls under everything we just said about that swing man. Just simply put, not a good athlete. His feet are clunky. He is going to struggle with speed at the next level as a tackle. So he's probably never going to be a starting tackle at the next level. But this guy played center in his senior season because they had an injury and they trusted him to move from tackle to center. That gives me plenty of confidence that he could also play guard. And Oregon just kind of cranks out offensive linemen because their scheme gets rid of the ball so quick. And, it's kind of like how Justin Murray survived at right tackle for the Cardinals last year because they got rid of the ball so quick. If you ask him to pass block for longer, probably not going to be super successful. But at Oregon, he's able to just kind of get in people's way and be smart and not get confused by schemes and get in people's way. He could be a starting guard or a starting center. I don't know. I don't know if he's strong enough to do that necessarily. But he is a guy that I want on my football team because he can play anywhere and not be a colossal disaster. He'll get outmatched by better athletes for sure. And that's why I don't think he's a starter. But I think in the 4th, 5th round, if you need a 6th man on your offensive lineman, him and Ben Barch are just fantastic picks. They're also great guys for offensive lines like I think of like the Chargers, the Jags, the Jets. Some of these offensive lines that are in a total transition, maybe even the Broncos with Juwan. Yeah, is it Jennings? The right tackle that they signed from Miami. He's an injury machine. They don't have a right guard right now. Like teams that are kind of in flux at certain positions where like they have bodies and they think they have their starters, but none of them are locks. Maybe the Vikings are another great example with their guard situation. Just a guy to come in and compete and, if nothing else, push the guys they do have because Barch or Calvin Throckmorton can be a good player. 2 more guys I'll hit on who are just insanely raw, high upside guys. Alex Taylor, who I rank 16th. He's weird. He's 6'8", 305, but a really good athlete. But right now, he's more tight end than offensive tackle. He kind of got thrown around at the Senior Bowl. He is a total day 3 project coming out of South Carolina State. Like, I couldn't tell you if this guy's going to be any good. I would say there's a good chance he's not, that he doesn't develop as a 23-year-old, but he's 6'8", 305 and can absolutely move. Maybe even have him lose weight and play tight end. I don't know. He's just a rare athlete who survived at tackle, didn't just get obliterated, so he's intriguing. 5th, 6th round, if you got nothing better to do and you kind of need a developmental tackle to put in the building, why not? That's kind of how I feel about him. And then Sadiq Charles, a lot of people like him as a 2nd, 3rd round pick because he's a true junior and a really good athlete coming out of LSU. I think he's probably a guard. His play strength is almost laughable. His technique is terrible. I don't think he's a very good football player. I thought he probably should have come back for his senior year. I have him as a 5th to 7th round draft value, just like Alex Taylor, who we just mentioned. He could be good. You could coach the guy up. He's still young, but he's just not ready. And I'd rather take him than like Tyree Phillips or Colton McKivitz or Justin Herron, Hakeem Adeniji. Like, there's a bunch of guys that are just a guy that are probably going to be your 7th or 8th best tackle and then be out of the league in 4 years. I'd rather take a Sadiq Charles, who's a super rare, high upside guy, but not if you need someone that can be that 6th man that you need to rely on in year 1. But he is intriguing, I'll give you that. So those are the tackle prospects. Really deep class. That's rare that we can go 17 deep worth of players worth talking about at tackle. So potentially getting an influx at tackle. Now let's talk about the interior guys. And I'm going to try to go as far as order of ranking these guys, combining the centers and the guards together. So that would place Cesar Ruiz. I actually need to update my draft board because Cesar Ruiz has passed Tyler Biadasz for me because of the upside. Biadasz, we'll talk about him in a second, but Ruiz is just a super fluid mover. Oh my goodness. Super fluid mover. He reminds me a little bit of James Daniels coming out of Iowa 2 years ago. Reminds me a little bit of what's the name of the Packers guard they took out of Mississippi State last year? Jennings? Can't think of his Elton Jenkins. Reminds me a little bit of those two players who have both been really good interior offensive linemen and young guys who have played some center. Both Jenkins and Daniels were centers in college, but were asked to play guard right away. I look at Cesar Ruiz the same way. Totally could be a center. And Daniels, by the way, is a center now. That's how I view Cesar Ruiz. Maybe you have a veteran center in place. He plays guard for a year and then kicks into center. Maybe he just starts at center. Maybe he's a long-term guard. I don't think it matters. He is a great athlete, flies off the ball, gets ideal push, can move, play in any of these schemes that has these moving pockets. He can get to the second level. He can pull in power. He is a legitimately scheme-independent stud. Now, he just lacks a little bit of that technique and awareness. He's a younger player, but I think it'll get there. So he is, I need to update my board if you are on Patreon and you're looking at this and you're like, wait a minute, that's off. Ruiz has passed Tyler Biadasz. I just need to update that. And then Tyler Biadasz is my number 2 guy. A little bit of PTSD from Michael Dieter last year, who I really liked. I had a 2nd-round grade on Dieter, was much higher on him than everyone else. Because I just think if you play interior offensive line at Wisconsin for 4 years and you rarely make mistakes and you dominate, that's going to translate to the next level, at least with a certain high floor. And that's how I view Tyler Biadasz. Just not a very good athlete. He doesn't get to the second level super easily, but a powerful dude. And an effective smart center is coming out as an underclassman. Probably not as good of an athlete as Travis Frederick, but if he was a 10-year just really quality starter at center, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised. So Cesar Ruiz 1, Tyler Biadasz 2, and then I would probably have to talk about Netane Moody next, who, if it weren't for injury concerns, a guy that has had season-ending injuries in 3 straight years, but when he's out there is one of the best guard prospects of the last 5 years. The dude is insane. Showed up in the combine, did 44 bench reps, was like, see ya. Like, he's super strong. He's a good enough athlete. He's not, like, insanely explosive. A little bit like Will Hernandez coming out of UTEP, was it? Just someone that I felt really good about being a well-rounded baller. But the injury kind of cuts that floor out from under him. So I love the idea of taking a chance on him at the end of the 2nd round. But because of the injury stuff, I do have a 2nd to a 5th round grade on him. I think he's the only player in this class that I have such a wide range on. If he went like the 35th pick, if the Bengals took him with the 33rd pick, that would tell me that they believed in his medicals, and that's great. If he fell to the 4th or the 5th round, I'd be like, all right, the teams just don't believe in his medicals, and I wouldn't blame anyone for passing on him because he just hasn't been able to stay healthy, but he is outstanding. He is my number 1 guard on the board because he is just the best player if he's healthy. And all these other guys, like, they don't stun me. Next up, Damian Lewis, guard out of LSU. He is a last chance U transfer, for those that are familiar with the Netflix show. So a guy that probably had some troubles early on. I can't say I'm too familiar with his background, but he stabilized himself at LSU and really seems to have gotten his career on the right track. I have not heard of any sort of character issues with the guy, so I'm comfortable having him here number 2. Some of his impact blocks are crazy. They kind of remind me of Kaleki Asemele about 5 years ago, who was one of the best guards in the NFL and then very quickly kind of fell away. But he's a stud. He just mauls dudes. Now, really bad balance, really stiff feet as a pass blocker. Huge concern. Maybe a guy that should sit for a little bit, but I think I've put him in Baltimore. He'd be a great fit there at right guard to replace Marshall Yanda because they run the ball so much. I think he's the best run blocking guard in this class after Netane Moody. So I do like him. There are some question marks as far as his pass blocking, but he's a really intriguing prospect. Then I've got a center here, Nick Harris out of Washington. I really like him to the LA Rams in the second round with their first pick in this draft. So I have a second to a third round grade on him. He's one of the best athletes at offensive line in this position in this class. He's just so fluid. He is going to struggle with play strength. He's 6'1", 302, right? So he can kind of get manhandled a little bit. But with the Rams, what they do so well, I mean, most of their run schemes are outside zones. And but they run a ton of their pass protection sets are moving pockets off of play action. So you're asking a guy to guide a defensive tackle, sell the run, and then have the balance to kind of stop in place and restabilize on the move and recreate a pocket. It's a really tough thing to ask of a lineman, but Nick Harris might be the best player in this class at doing that, especially on the interior. And also, Brian Allen is the Rams center who stinks. So that, to me, that's one of those team value scheme fits that I am really locked in on, is Nick Harris to the Rams. But there's other teams like the 49ers, I would say, might keep an eye on this guy. And the Cincinnati Bengals might keep an eye on this guy. If he were there, say, in the third round, I think it would be an excellent fit. They do run that Cincinnati. They do run the Sean McVay scheme, rather. So then we have, so that was 5 players, Solomon Kinley and Michael Onwenu. Solomon Kinley, a redshirt junior out of Georgia, and Michael Onwenu, a senior out of Michigan. Both players very similar. Actually, take that back. I actually have much higher athleticism grades on Solomon Kinley, and that reminds me that his get-off is remarkable. He's a great run blocker, but also very steady as a pass blocker. It all sounds great. He just had a little bit of inconsistency, but I've got a third-round grade on him. Definitely could be a day one starter. Just gets pushed down a little bit because of the value at guard. I think I was confusing him a little bit with Michael Onwenu, who I do have right behind him, who is much more of a stiff mover, 6'3", 344 pounds. Not a guy you're going to want to play in an outside zone scheme, but if you run a lot of inside zone or even a power scheme where you ask the guard to pull, him on the move is not going to be ideal, but you put him kind of in a telephone booth or, that's the saying. You put him in short areas, don't ask him to move a whole lot. He can anchor really well as a pass blocker. He could absolutely be a starter. I'm higher on him than a lot of people. Most people actually have the other Michigan guard, Ben Bredesen, ahead of him. I have Ben Bredesen a couple rounds later. Then Robert Hunt. I really like Robert Hunt. He goes in that category of the same thing we talked about with Calvin Throckmorton and Ben Barch. And Hunt actually, I believe, comes in a little bit higher. Yes, I have a 3 to a 4 on Hunt. And I have also a 3 to 4 on Barch and a 4th on Throckmorton. But Hunt is a guy that actually played tackle at UL Lafayette, but his athleticism just isn't quite there. I think he's absolutely a guard at the next level, but kind of like a Billy Turner who we talked about, who can be a low-end starter, can be a swingman, just a valuable piece to have and a great player to add early day 3, I would say. Maybe late day 3, late third round, maybe. But I do like him. I think he could be a low-end starter. Then Jonah Jackson, he's actually really shooting up out of nowhere. I might need to take a second look at him. I don't know. He's a 23-year-old graduate senior out of Ohio State. He had a good senior year. He's a good athlete. I didn't think he was like amazing as an athlete. I don't know. I thought him and Ben Bredesen, who people seem to be a little higher on, I think they're good players. I could totally see them being starters in the NFL, but they just didn't really pop to me. And if you don't really pop at guard, it's hard for me to say you're a day 2 prospect. But I do have those guys. I have Jonah Jackson right behind Robert Hunt as a 3rd to a 4th round grade. And then Bredesen, I have a 4th to a 5th round grade on. Then at center, another guy I really like is Matt Hennessy, who I have a 4th to a 5th round grade on. He's very similar to Nick Harris. Coming out of Temple, really good athlete. Temple just is a magical weight room. I don't know how they produce all these freaks, and they don't win a lot of football games, but they impress year after year at the Combine. Matt Hennessy was one of the most fluid-moving athletes at the Combine, size considered. His tape was just inconsistent. He struggled with power, and as a junior coming out, like I don't know if he's a center, to be completely honest. He could be a guard. But either way, he's comfortable at center. He should be able to play guard. I just don't know if like mentally he's ready to play center at the next level. Could get there. But I think I mocked him to Cincinnati, I think, at the top of the 3rd round. I could be wrong. But like something like that. Some scheme. No, it was Arizona. Arizona, who doesn't have a center. Arizona wants their linemen to be able to move a lot. So that would be a great fit. Any kind of team that wants to run a lot of screens, wants their linemen on the move, that's going to be a great spot for Matt Hennessy. Then after that, you're looking at kind of just a guy. Like basically all the scouting profiles after that, it's like, yeah, he's just a guy. Like there's nothing really crazy about his athleticism. You got John Simpson, Shane Lemieux out of Clemson and Oregon. I've got them as 4th, 5th round picks. Guys that could be fringe starters, come in and compete at guard, but probably not starting caliber guys. Then I got to drop off to the rest of the class. So there's those guys. And then at center, after those 4 guys we talked about, you do have Jake Hansen. He's a good player. Just, kind of like we said about Oregon, they have a great unit there. Everyone's a good player. I don't know how many of them are great players. He might just be a backup center. I just don't know if he has the athleticism and the strength to be a true starter, but he's a smart player. And then same thing about Keith Ishmael out of San Diego State. He's a really good run blocker. Like he understands kind of spacing and where he needs to be. Really good at cutting guys off, getting up to the 2nd level, but he just lacks the get off and athletic traits. He's actually a junior coming out. One guy we haven't talked about is Lloyd Cushenberry, who I have as my 7th center. And maybe I need to revisit him. But I currently have a 6th round grade on this player who many people are mocking in the 2nd round. And I'll be completely honest, I only watched his game against Auburn. I figured, let's see how he looks against a good NFL caliber defensive line with Marlon Davidson and Derek Brown, who's going to be a top 10 to 15 defensive tackle in this class. And he just shit the bed. Like, he was so bad. He got run over, embarrassed himself, like a bench-worthy performance. And he's coming out as a junior. The rest of his grades for the rest of the season aren't that good. I just don't get it. Maybe I need to go revisit him. It was just one game. I only watch one game for guys that I have day 3 grades on. And that was the one I chose to watch, and he embarrassed himself. Now, when I see a bunch of people have 2nd, 3rd round grades on him, I do need to go and check the guy out because clearly people are seeing something. Or maybe it's just he went to LSU and people want to boost him up. But he's a good athlete, sure, but not like some elite athlete, I don't think. I don't know. I will definitely give him a second look before we get to the draft night, but you probably will not hear me talk about Lloyd Cushenberry anymore unless you are a patron and can get my draft board. You can follow any tweaks I make to that grade, but I will be sure to give him a second look. Before we get to draft night, which is a great way to send off this podcast, make sure you guys follow me on YouTube. youtube.com/ThatFranchiseGuy, and on Twitch, twitch.tv/ThatFranchiseGuy, because with the draft, I am so excited this year. I mean, the corona situation sucks, but I will be completely honest. The draft not being in a big, flashy live event, it being this kind of closed off, from home television production, benefits me a lot. And I really hope you guys consider enjoying the NFL draft with me. Just put ESPN or NFL Network up on your TV, but mute it. Don't listen to those fools. Listen to me and hang out with me. You can comment, ask me questions, get my live reactions to all the craziest picks. I mean, I'm obviously biased, but I think my streams are going to be much more fun to be a part of than whatever NFL Network and ESPN put out this year, because the players won't be there. There won't be all this stuff. So, guys, I cannot wait for the draft. I am so excited. The first night I will do on YouTube live, and then days 2 and 3 will be a Twitch deal. And then I'm not making any promises right now, but I'm fairly certain I'm going to do this one of these nights, a 32-team, 7-round mock draft, drafting every pick for every team. It's ambitious, but I want to do a stream of it, and I want to do it on Twitch. So follow me on Twitch. It's twitch.tv/ThatFranchiseGuy, and you can follow all of that. So that's the podcast. That was a ton of fun talking offensive linemen. I love me some hog mollies. I know a lot of people don't go too in-depth into the offensive line class, but I hope that you really found this informative. And, I'm not going to be right about all these guys, but I did watch all of these guys play, and I hope you appreciate the information I brought forward to you guys. And that's it. Let's send this thing off. Cheers, guys. Rate and review the podcast. We'll see you later. Peace.